The snow had not stopped for 3 days. It fell in thick, slow sheets, muffling the world in white silence and erasing every known path. The wind carried no sound but its own hollow voice dragging across the plains like the memory of something lost. On the western rise, a black speck moved against the gray, a man on horseback hunched low, his oilskin coat stiff with ice. The mare limped one back leg favoring the other, and the rider's gloves were crusted over fingers, barely moving on the reins. Elias Banner had not spoken a word since the storm began. There was no one to speak to anyway. The land stretched barren and cold, in every direction a frozen sea of drifting white, broken only by the bones of fence posts and the gnarled claws of cottonwoods. His beard was frosted, stiff lips, cracked and numb. The scar along his jaw, a relic from another life, burned under the cold like it remembered things he tried to forget. At the edge of a windbreak, the horse stopped, ears twitching. Elias slid down, boots crunching hard into the ice-crusted snow. The old barn, what was left of it, leaned like a drunk against the wind. He hadn't been out this far in months, had no reason to be, but something had drawn him today. A bad feeling in his gut. Or maybe just that old ache that sometimes pushed him toward ruins. He pulled the barn door open. It moaned on its hinges just enough to let him slip inside. The air was warmer by only a breath, but it was still air. Still silence. Then he heard it. A rustle, a cough, the scrape of something alive. He froze. In the half-light he saw them, curled up together like pups in a den. 7 of them. Children. The oldest, maybe 12. The youngest small enough to still need help feeding herself. Their faces were hollowed out by hunger, red with cold eyes, too tired to look afraid. One of them clutched a broken broom handle like a weapon. They didn't speak. Neither did he. Elias stepped forward slowly, like approaching a spooked animal. He knelt, one knee sinking into straw and frozen mud. His throat was dry. His voice came out rough. "Who left you here?" No answer. Just stares. The oldest boy, freckled, sharp-eyed, glanced toward a pile of snow at the far wall. A lump under a blanket. Elias walked over, knelt again, lifted the edge. A woman. Dead. She'd frozen days ago, her arm curled around nothing. Elias stared at her for a long while. There was no ring on her hand, no sign of a wagon or even a trail left behind. She had brought them here to die, and only she had succeeded so far. When he looked back, the youngest child had started to cry without sound. Her shoulders shook, mouth open, but no sobs came, just air and cold. Elias stood and rubbed his jaw, the frost falling from his beard in clumps. He could leave. No one would know. No one would blame him. They'd be dead by morning. He looked again at the girl. Then he cursed soft and quiet under his breath. Outside, the wind hit his face like a slap. He pulled the mare to the door, tied her off, and started lifting the children one by one into the saddle. The oldest boy wouldn't meet his eye, but didn't fight. The smallest wouldn't let go of her sister's sleeve. Elias took them all. It took 4 trips. His hands were bleeding by the end, and his horse stumbled with exhaustion, but he didn't stop. By nightfall, the storm had eased just a little. The lantern in his cabin threw a circle of gold across the snow. He carried them inside, each one light as feathers, and set them by the stove. Stripped off their wet clothes, found old quilts, burlap sacks, anything for warmth. He boiled potatoes, broth, what little he had. They ate slowly, not trusting it. No one asked who he was. He didn't ask their names. That could come later. For now they were alive, and the wind outside had finally gone still. The girl coughed through the night, a dry, rattling sound that came from deep in her chest. Elias stayed awake, sitting in the rocker by the stove, boots off, legs stretched, eyes fixed on the fading fire. He didn't touch her, didn't speak. Just listen." The others slept in a pile, limp and dreamless, scattered across the floor like thrown laundry. By morning, the air inside the cabin smelled of wood smoke, old wool, and broth. He stirred a pot of cornmeal mush with his left hand, the right still stiff from the cold. The girl's eyes opened blue, glassy, and tracked his movements. She tried to sit up but gave up halfway. He walked over, crouched, and held out a tin cup. "Drink slow." She did. Half spilled down her chin, and he wiped it with the corner of a blanket. She watched him with the weary gaze of someone used to waiting for the world to get worse. After breakfast, the oldest boy finally spoke. "You gonna send us to town?" Elias didn't look up from the fire. "Ain't been to town in near 5 months. Don't got people."
No.
The boy didn't ask anything else. That day they worked. Not because he asked them to, but because it was what people did to survive. Elias split wood. The boys hauled it. The middle girl swept out the corner with her sleeve tied to a stick. They moved like ghosts, thin, silent, careful not to take up space. The only one who made a sound was the youngest, who dragged a wooden spoon through the ash under the stove, humming tunelessly. By the second night, Elias built a makeshift bed from hay and canvas. He laid the smallest 3 together and stacked his old coats over them. The others stayed near the stove. Nobody cried. Nobody spoke about the woman in the barn. On the 3rd day, he took the mare to check the trap lines. He was gone 5 hours. When he returned, the door was bolted from inside. He knocked once. Waited. The boy opened it holding a rusted carving knife. Elias looked down at it. "You use that on me and nobody eats tonight?" The boy stepped back. That night they ate rabbit stew. Elias gave the last of his onions to the pot. He let them take seconds. The girl with the cough slept quieter, though her breath still sounded brittle. They stayed. Days passed. Then a week. The storms rolled through again and no one left. Elias built a bench along the cabin wall, reinforced the roof with whatever he could find. One morning he saw the oldest boy boiling snow in the kettle without being told. Another day the second youngest, a boy with ears too big for his head, carried in firewood twice his size and dropped it with pride. Elias didn't say much, but he saw. He saw how they never asked for anything, how they waited for food like dogs who'd been beat, how they flinched at loud noise, how none of them could say the woman's name. On the 9th night, as the wind tore against the windows, one of the girls, maybe 8, with stringy red hair, sat beside him at the stove. She didn't speak for a long while. Finally she asked, "You got a Bible?" He nodded. "Somewhere." She didn't ask him to find it, just sat there chewing on the inside of her cheek, staring into the fire like it might answer something. He didn't know what to say to children. Never had any of his own. Never wanted them. But here they were, and not one of them asked to be. Later that night, as he lay on the cot by the door, Elias found himself whispering words he hadn't spoken in 20 years. "Thank you," he said into the dark. He didn't know who he was saying it to. Ride forward. Subscribe for the next turning point. The days blurred into each other, wrapped in cold and repetition. Morning brought the chores, and the children joined without prompting. Elias never assigned tasks, never spoke of rules, but somehow everything got done. The firewood stayed stacked, the stove stayed fed, and the cabin, though cramped, no longer stank of fear. They didn't ask when they'd leave. He didn't ask if they planned to. When the sun came out for the first time in 2 weeks, it caught on the frost along the window and spilled gold across the floorboards. Elias stood outside watching it melt into the snowbanks. His mare ribs showing more than before, nosed at the hay he'd rationed. A crow sat on the fence, head tilted like it knew more than it should. Behind him the cabin door creaked open. The oldest boy, Thomas, he'd finally said, stepped onto the porch. hands stuffed deep into the sleeves of a too-big coat. Elias didn't turn, but he heard the boy's breath slow and careful. "She was our mama," the boy said. "Name was Ruth." Elias nodded. "She weren't right for a long time, since Pa left." "She say where she was headed?" "No, just said we'd keep going till we found God or help." He paused. "We didn't find either." Elias exhaled through his nose. "Could have gone worse." Thomas rubbed at a spot on the porch rail. "You ain't asked nothing about us." "I figured if you wanted to tell it, you would." The boy gave a quiet snort. "You're not much for talk, are you?" "Nope." Thomas stayed quiet a long time. "Then you're gonna send us back." Elias looked at the horizon. Snowfields long and quiet. "Back where?" Thomas shrugged. "County poorhouse. Or the mission. Somewhere with names on cots." Elias didn't answer. He just walked off the porch and split wood till his arms burned. That night he pulled out a crate from under the cot. Inside was a long-forgotten bottle of ink, a stub of a pen, and a stack of yellowed paper. He hadn't written in years. His hand shook more than he expected, and the words came slow. The letter wasn't long. Just the facts. 7 children. No known kin. Found after the blizzard. Mother dead. He didn't sign it right away. A week later, a rider came from town. Miss Alberta Cook, schoolteacher and self-appointed overseer of decency, wrapped tight in a fur coat that still smelled of mothballs. She dismounted with a glare. "You're the one who wrote me." "I am." "These the children?" "They are." She stepped inside, boots crunching across the threshold, eyes sharp as needles. The children stood in a line near the stove, hands folded back straight. They didn't smile, just watched. Miss Cook turned back to Elias. "You can't just keep them." He crossed his arms. "Not keeping. Just haven't let go." She sniffed. "They need schooling, clean clothes, discipline. They got warmth, food, peace." She raised her chin. "They need more than that. Maybe. But they needed less than that to die." For a long moment the room held its breath. Then the youngest girl walked forward, barefoot, hair tangled, and reached for Elias's hand. He let her. Miss Cook stared. Something softened almost. She sighed. "I'll see what can be arranged." When she left, she took no one with her. The children stayed. That night Elias added more wood to the fire and sat down with them to eat. No one said it out loud, but something had changed. There was still hunger and cold and silence, but no fear. And when he stood to clear the bowls, the girl with the cough looked up and whispered something. "Thank you." It was the first thing she'd said. He nodded. The thaw came slow. Not the kind that made rivers run or green things push through, just a loosening of the land. Snowbanks shrank. The roof stopped groaning. The mare walked steadier. And inside the cabin the silence softened. The children began to laugh again. Quiet at first, like it might get them scolded. But when Elias didn't say anything, didn't even look up from the task at hand, it grew bolder. The youngest started humming while she swept. The red-haired girl braided wild tufts into the other's hair with brittle twine. Thomas began whittling again, small animals shaped from kindling, crude but detailed. Elias watched without watching. He patched the chicken coop, fixed the cracked window, cleaned the rust from an old bellows. He noticed the way Thomas stood taller now. The way the second oldest boy, Sam, the one who'd barely spoken, started reading from the family Bible by lamplight, his finger tracing each line with care. One afternoon as they hauled water from the creek, Thomas asked, "You always live out here alone?" Elias didn't answer right away. "Wasn't always." The boy waited. "Had a brother. Lost him." "To what?" "War. Then a woman." Lost her too. Different kind of battle. Thomas nodded like he understood. He probably did more than a boy should. You ever think of leaving, the boy asked. Used to. Not lately. Thomas kicked a clump of snow. We could help more if you wanted. Build things up again. Elias looked out toward the line of the cottonwoods half buried in drifts. The idea settled in his chest like something warm. Maybe. They rebuilt the lean-to that spring, dug a new latrine, fixed the smokehouse. It wasn't fast, but it was steady. Elias didn't lead, not exactly, but he gave room. When they made mistakes, he didn't yell. When they asked questions, he gave plain answers. And sometimes he just listened. One evening after supper, the girl with the cough, her name was Ruthie, they'd said, came to him with a scrap of cloth and a handful of wildflowers. We made you something, she said, voice still thin. It was a crude banner stitched with uneven thread. On it was a house, a sun, 7 stick figures, and a horse with legs too long. Across the bottom it read HOME. Elias didn't say a word, just folded it once and slid it into the inside pocket of his coat. He didn't wear that coat much anymore, but he kept it close. By the time the first grass showed green and stubborn, the children had begun calling him Mr. Banner. Not Pa, not Uncle, but something with weight. They built a new fence for the garden, planted potatoes and beans, raised a coop full of chicks, loud and useless and full of life. Elias showed them how to sharpen a blade, how to spot a bad cloud, how to gut a fish with clean hands. They showed him how to laugh without reason, how to make space at the table for stories that had nothing to do with survival. But nothing stays untouched forever. Word spread. There were rumors in town that a strange man had taken in a pack of orphans, that he was keeping them from proper schooling, from church, that maybe he wasn't right in the head, that maybe they weren't safe. Miss Cook returned in early June this time with 2 men from the county office and papers in her hand. Elias didn't let the children come to the porch. He stood in the doorway, arms crossed. They need to come with us, one of the men said, for evaluation, until legal placement is settled. They are settled. That's not your call to make. Inside, Ruthie began to cry. Elias heard it and didn't turn. His jaw clenched. You take them now, he said, you undo everything they've survived. You understand that? It's procedure. Elias stepped out, his boots sinking into the earth, eyes dark. Then change the damn procedure. The standoff hung in the air like gun smoke. Miss Cook shifted beside the men but said nothing. Elias didn't blink. They ain't going. Not today. After a long silence, the man folded the papers and walked back to the wagon. They left in silence. That night, Elias sat with them around the fire. No one asked what would happen next. They just sat close, like always. And when the wind picked up, it didn't sound like a threat anymore. It rained the next day, a slow, steady fall that turned the dirt road to thick soup and made the air smell of wet wood and thawed manure. Elias worked through it as always, shoveling drainage ditches, setting traps for the raccoons nosing at the henhouse. The children stayed busy indoors, turning crates into shelves, sorting through the sacks of flour and oats he'd brought from the feed store last week. By now they knew where everything belonged. That night, while thunder rolled low in the hills, Ruthie curled up beside Elias's chair with a blanket and a book. She couldn't read yet, not really, but she traced the shapes of the letters with her finger and whispered made-up stories to herself. Elias pretended not to listen. Thomas was carving again. The boy had talent, real bone-deep skill. The figure in his hand, half-finished, was a likeness of Ruth, their mother. Elias had seen it the day before and hadn't said anything. Now he looked at it longer. You remember her well? He asked. Thomas nodded. Some things. She loved you. The boy kept his eyes on the blade. don't think she knew how to stop being scared. Elias leaned forward, hands clasped. That ain't the same as not loving. Thomas didn't answer, but he whittled slower. The next day Miss Cook returned alone. No wagon. No man. She came on footboots, mud-stained hat in hand. Elias met her on the porch. "I told them you wouldn't let go easy," she said. "Told them it was a waste of ink and time." He waited. "They still want paperwork. Schooling. Names recorded." She looked up at him, eyes tired. "But they've agreed if the children stay, it's got to be formal. Legal guardianship. That comes with inspection. Records. Swearing on a Bible or better." Elias nodded. "You can write it?" "I can." He didn't thank her. Just stepped aside, let her into the cabin. The children watched from behind their books and chores, still as shadows. Miss Cook greeted each by names she must have memorized from her last visit, and sat at the table with a small inkpot and a bent pen. It took the whole afternoon. Birthdates were guessed, last names confirmed, signatures made with trembling hands. Thomas helped the littlest girl hold the pen steady. Ruthie signed hers with a drawing of a star. And at the end, Elias wrote his name in strong square letters across every page. His hands didn't shake. That night they feasted by their standards. Fried cornmeal, boiled beans, pickled eggs from the root cellar. The children laughed loud, their voices bouncing off the low ceiling, unafraid. Elias brought out a fiddle he hadn't touched in 15 years. Tuned it slow, quiet. Play a hymn first, then something faster. The little ones danced. Sam clapped along. Ruthie fell asleep, curled against his leg, thumb in her mouth. After they were down, Elias stepped outside. The sky was clear, stars bright enough to see the rise of the hill behind the barn. A coyote yipped somewhere far off, then fell quiet again. Miss Cook came out beside him. "You've done something here. I didn't plan to." "That's the thing about good things," she said. "They don't wait for your plans." They stood in silence for a while. "You could have walked away," she said. "That first night. No one would have blamed you." "I know. Why didn't you?" He looked down at his hands. The scars. The dirt under his nails. The ink stains from the forms. "I reckon I remembered what it feels like," he said. "To be left behind." She nodded, then turned and left without another word. The cabin lights glowed behind him, warm as a hearth in winter, and Elias Rancher Loner, the man the town had nearly forgotten, stood a long while on the porch, watching the sky like it might finally offer an answer. Summer settled in without permission. The air grew thick and slow, heavy with the smell of sun-baked wood and horse sweat. Dust clung to everything. The children kicked off their boots before they crossed the threshold, now half out of habit, half out of respect. Ruthie left wildflowers on the table every morning. No one told her to. The garden took root. Squash vines crept along the fence. The beans climbed. Elias watched it all with the wary patience of a man who'd seen too much die too early. He watered when he could, repaired the broken hoe, and when a hawk snatched one of the hens in broad daylight, he sat with the littlest girl Addie while she cried over the feathers. He didn't tell her it would be all right. He just sat. One morning Elias found Thomas fixing the axle on the cart. "You get that from your father?" he asked. Thomas didn't look up. "He never stayed long enough to show us much." "But you're learning." "From you," the boy said, then caught himself, face flushing red. Elias said nothing, just handed him the wrench and kept working. By late July, Miss Cook sent word that a circuit judge would be riding through to finalize the guardianship. It would be binding, permanent, legal. Elias read the letter twice, then folded it and slipped it into the pocket with Ruthie's banner. He didn't smile, not exactly, but something in his shoulders loosened. That night the older kid stayed up late helping him clean the barn. Not because it was needed, but because it felt like something to do, to mark the occasion, to show they had a right to stay. The next day the judge arrived, a thin, sun-worn man with wire spectacles and a limp. He looked the place over without expression, walked through the coop, peered at the ledger Elias had kept in an old tobacco tin, asked the children a few quiet questions. "Do you feel safe here?" he asked Ruthie. She nodded. "We got a stove and food and stories at night." The judge looked at Elias. "Stories. She likes to pretend I'm a good storyteller." The judge chuckled once, scribbled something. When it came time to sign the final documents, Elias hesitated, not out of doubt, but out of reverence, like the act itself might crack something open. He pressed the pen hard enough to tear the page. After it was done, the judge tipped his hat. "You've made a home, Mr. Banner." Not many could do the same. Elias didn't answer, but his jaw worked like he was swallowing something thick. That evening, as the sun dropped behind the hills, they lit a fire in the pit behind the cabin, roasted potatoes, burned a few. The children sang off key and loud. Thomas brought out his whittled animals, lined them up like a parade across the bench. Elias sat with his cup of chicory listening, watching. His heart felt too big in his chest, like it might spill out. Addie crawled into his lap, head on his shoulder. "Are we yours now?" she asked. He looked into the fire, took a breath. "You've been mine since the night I found you." She smiled content and didn't say another word. Later, when the stars were out and the world had gone soft and quiet, Elias walked the edge of the field. The land was still hard, still wild, but it was no longer empty. Something had taken root in the earth, in him, and this time he meant to keep it. The first frost came early that year. It crept in overnight, turning the leaves brittle and silvering the field grass under the moon. The children woke with their breath clouding in the air and ran laughing to the stove. Elias was already up stirring a pot of oats, boots wet from checking the traps. Thomas chopped kindling without being asked. Sam fixed the loose latch on the door. Addie bundled herself in 2 sweaters and a quilt, dragging her spoon along the floor as she hummed to herself. They moved like a family now, not in name, not in blood, but in the slow, certain rhythm of people who knew how to stay. Elias had stopped expecting the quiet to return. He had grown used to footsteps at night, to voices arguing over chores, to laughter loud and reckless and beautiful. And sometimes, after the cabin had gone still, he would lie awake on his cot, staring at the beams above, wondering what Ruth would have thought if she'd lived long enough to see this. He didn't think she'd recognize him. One morning in early October, a rider came fast from town, dust on his coat, worry in his face. Elias met him halfway down the path. "Fire," the man said. "It's got to the edge of Black Hollow. Folks are moving livestock. Might reach the river if the wind picks up." Elias didn't ask what he needed. He just saddled the mare, tied down the tools, and left Thomas in charge. "You watch them," he said. "You hear me." "I hear you," Thomas said, jaw tight. He was gone 3 days. When he returned, smoke clung to his clothes, and there was a burn across the back of his hand. But the house stood. The children stood. The garden was gone to frost, the co-op thinned by hawks, but the hearth was warm, and someone had mended the torn curtain near the window. Ruthie ran to him and hugged him tight around the waist. He stood stiff at first, then slowly let his hand rest on her head. "I kept the fire going," she said, proud. "I can see that." That night they sat around the stove, and Elias told them about the fire line, about the barn he helped save, about the man who lost his cattle and still passed around bread to the others. "Sometimes," he said, "you don't know what you're made of until everything around you burns." The room went quiet. Thomas poked at the fire, You think it'll come here? Elias shook his head. Not now. We've got too much green between. Sam said even if it did, we'd stick. Elias looked around at their faces, the ash on his coat, the calluses on their hands, the place that used to be his and now was theirs. You would, he said. The days shortened. The winds came sharp. At night they slept closer. Ruthie stopped coughing. Addie started writing letters to a friend in town, though she never mailed them. Thomas began talking about building another room on the cabin. Come spring, something bigger with windows facing the fields. Elias didn't say no. One evening, as snow began to fall for the first time that winter, the children set up a row of 7 tin cups on the porch rail. Let them fill just to watch the snow pile up evenly. Elias stood behind them, arms crossed, breath pluming in the cold. The world felt still. Not dead like before, but expectant. You'll want boots soon, he said. We'll make do, Thomas replied. Elias looked at them, all these stray souls who had turned a hard winter into something whole, and he knew in that moment that the blizzard had not taken everything. It had given something back. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out the banner Ruthie had made months ago, unfolded it, smoothed the creases. He tacked it above the hearth. No one said a word. But when the wind howled again that night, it did not sound like loneliness. It sounded like home. The road remembers footsteps. Subscribe and follow them.